"Mom, you're pathetic. $150 in your account, and you still act important," Michael said in front of his girlfriend, laughing in my face. I swallowed hard, didn't say a word, just smiled, and left an envelope on the table. But when he opened it, 6 minutes later, the laughter turned to panic. He didn't want to believe what he saw. Those words cut through me like a knife on that cold Saturday morning in February. There I was, standing in my own kitchen in Cicero, Illinois, a small working-class suburb just outside Chicago, asking my 30-year-old son Michael if he could help me with $120 for the water heater repair. My Social Security check of $1,843 was stretched thin at the end of the month, and I had exactly $85.37 left in my checking account. Michael was sitting at my kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years, where we'd shared thousands of meals as a family. But now he was laughing at me in front of Emily, his 24-year-old girlfriend who'd been living in my apartment rent-free for the past 6 months. "This is so embarrassing, Michael," Emily chimed in, not even bothering to look up from her phone. She tossed her bleached blonde hair over her shoulder with that dismissive gesture I'd grown to hate. "Your mom begging you for money when you can barely take care of yourself." The smell of the bacon and eggs I'd just cooked for them still hung in the air. I'd gotten up at 7 in the morning, like I always did, to make them a proper breakfast. My hands were still warm from the skillet, and there they were, eating my food in my home, mocking me for being broke. My heart started racing. The familiar tightness in my chest that I'd been feeling for months got worse. I could feel my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the edge of the counter. Here was my son, my only child, unemployed for almost 2 years, living in my apartment completely free, eating my groceries, using my electricity, my water, my Wi-Fi, and he had the nerve to call me pathetic. But something was different that morning. Instead of apologizing like I usually did, instead of backing down and saying I'd figure something else out, I felt this strange calm wash over me. I didn't say a word. I just forced a smile, walked to the junk drawer next to the refrigerator, and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been keeping there for 2 weeks. My hands were steady now. I placed it on the table right next to his plate of eggs and bacon. "What's this, Mom?" Michael asked, still half laughing, thinking this was some kind of joke. "Open it after you're done eating," I said calmly. My voice was quiet, but there was something in my tone that made Emily finally look up from her phone. I turned around and started washing the dishes, listening to the sound of their forks scraping against the plates. The kitchen was silent except for the running water and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door starting her car for her Saturday grocery run. About 10 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of paper tearing. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. "Mom." Michael's voice came out shaky, barely above a whisper. "What? How did you—" I didn't turn around. I kept washing dishes, my back to them, but I could feel the energy in the room change completely. The casual arrogance was gone. Now there was panic. Emily's voice cut through the tension. "Michael, what is this? What's wrong?" I finally turned around and saw my son's face, white as a sheet, holding a legal document in his trembling hands. He was staring at the deed to the apartment. My apartment that he'd always assumed belonged to me and would automatically be his when I died. Except it wasn't in my name anymore. It was in my sister Margaret's name. Had been for the past 5 years. Along with the deed, there was a typed letter on Margaret's letterhead explaining that both Michael and Emily had 30 days to vacate the premises. "Mom, this can't be real," Michael stammered. "The apartment. It's yours. It's always been yours." Emily grabbed the papers from his hands, scanning them frantically. "This has to be fake. This is some kind of joke, right, Patricia?" I dried my hands on the dish towel, hung it neatly on the oven handle, and looked them both in the eyes. "No joke," I said. "It's real. You have 30 days. If you want to know how a 65-year-old retired math teacher from Chicago managed to pull off the most satisfying revenge of her life, you need to understand how I got to this point. You need to hear about the lies, the manipulation, and the moment I discovered they were planning to put me in a nursing home just to get their hands on my home. Let me go back a little and tell you how I got here. Part 2. The Foundation of Betrayal. Act 2. Context and Setup. My name is Patricia Ann Sullivan. I'm 65 years old, and for 34 years I taught high school algebra and geometry at Cicero South High School. I retired 4 years ago with a teacher's pension that, combined with Social Security, gives me about $2,300 a month. Not a fortune, but enough to live comfortably if you're careful with your money. I was always the kind of mother who put her child first, maybe too much. When my husband Robert died of a massive heart attack 9 years ago, Michael was 23 and in his final semester at the University of Illinois, Chicago, studying business administration. Robert's death hit us both hard, but I think I handled my grief by spoiling Michael even more than I already had. You see, Michael has always been our golden boy. Robert and I tried for years to have children, went through 3 miscarriages before Michael finally came along. He was our miracle baby, and we treated him like one. Private soccer lessons, summer camps, the latest video games, name-brand clothes. If Michael wanted it, we found a way to give it to him. Maybe that was our first mistake. After Robert's funeral, when Michael came to me crying, saying he couldn't focus on his final semester, that he was too overwhelmed to finish his degree, I told him it was okay. Take a year off, I said. Get your head together. The degree will always be there. That was 8 years ago. Instead of going back to school, Michael bounced from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. First, it was online marketing. He spent 6 months taking courses that cost me $2,400, promising he was going to make 6 figures selling other people's products online. When that didn't work out, it was cryptocurrency. Then dropshipping. Then he was going to start a food truck business. "Mom, I'm an entrepreneur," he'd say whenever I suggested maybe he should look for a regular job. "I'm building something bigger than a 9-to-5. But nothing ever got built. 2 years ago, when Michael got laid off from his part-time job at a sporting goods store, the only real job he'd held for more than 6 months, I made another mistake. I let him move back in with me temporarily. My apartment in Cicero is a modest 2-bedroom that I bought in 1987 for $43,000. Today, it's worth about $180,000, thanks to decades of hard work and careful savings. Michael moved into the 2nd bedroom, the one that used to be his childhood room, still decorated with his old Chicago Bears posters and high school trophies. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom," he promised. "Maybe 3 months, max." 3 months turned into 6. 6 months turned into a year. And last August, he brought Emily home. Emily Martinez is 24 years old, originally from Rockford, Illinois. She calls herself a content creator and spends most of her day taking selfies and making short videos for social media. She has exactly 1,047 followers on Instagram. I checked, which means she's definitely not making any real money from sponsorships like she claims. Michael brought her over for dinner one night and she just never left. They didn't ask if she could move in. They didn't discuss rent or expenses. Emily just started leaving her clothes in Michael's room, using my shower, eating my food, and treating my home like her personal hotel. Within a month, the dynamic in my apartment completely changed. Suddenly, I wasn't the homeowner anymore. I was the inconvenient roommate. Emily would leave her makeup scattered across my bathroom counter. Michael started eating the groceries I bought for myself and then getting irritated when I mentioned I needed to go shopping again. "Mom, we're all adults here," he'd say. "We should split everything equally." Equally. The unemployed 30-year-old and his unemployed girlfriend wanted to split expenses equally with the woman whose apartment they were living in rent-free. But what really opened my eyes was how they talked to me. Not just what they said, but how they said it. Emily started calling me Patricia instead of Mrs. Sullivan, like we were college roommates. Michael began treating me like his personal assistant. "Mom, can you pick up some of that good coffee when you go to Jewel?" "Patricia, do you think you could do laundry today? We're out of clean towels." "Mom, what's for dinner tonight?" Never "thank you." Never "what can we do to help?" Never "we really appreciate you letting us stay here." The apartment I'd worked 34 years to pay for, the home where Robert and I had built our life together, was slowly being taken away from me by the son I'd sacrificed everything for. But I didn't realize how bad things had really gotten until I started noticing the money. You see, when you're living on a fixed income like I am, you pay attention to every dollar. My $2,300 has to cover my mortgage payment of $785, utilities that run about $250, groceries, gas for my 2014 Honda Civic, and whatever little emergencies come up. There's not much wiggle room. So when the grocery bills started getting higher and higher, I noticed. When the electric bill jumped from $120 to $190 because Emily was constantly using a hair straightener and curling iron, I noticed. When my internet bill went up because they needed premium speed for Emily's content creation, I noticed. But they didn't seem to notice how tight money was getting for me. In fact, they seemed to think I should be grateful to contribute to their lifestyle. The wake-up call came last December, right before Christmas. The water heater started making terrible noises, and when the repair guy came out, he said it needed to be replaced. The estimate was $2,800. I had exactly $432 in my savings account. When I explained to Michael that Christmas might have to be smaller this year because of the water heater, he actually got angry with me. "Mom, you own this place free and clear," he said. "Can't you just get a home equity loan or something? I mean, Emily and I were counting on Christmas being normal this year." Counting on Christmas being normal. Like it was my job to make sure their Christmas wasn't affected by my financial emergency. That's when I realized that in Michael's mind, I wasn't his mother anymore. I was just the woman who provided free housing and food while he figured out his life. And Emily wasn't my house guest anymore. She was the girlfriend who deserved to be comfortable while my son pursued his dreams. But what I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't discover for another 2 months, was just how far they were willing to go to make sure their comfortable situation became permanent. Part 3. The Lies Unravel Act 3. A Development and Complications. The first real crack in their facade came on a Tuesday morning in January. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, on her front porch when she mentioned something that stopped me cold. "Patricia, I saw Michael and Emily at Navy Pier yesterday around 11 in the morning," she said casually, stirring sugar into her coffee. "They were eating funnel cake and taking pictures by the lake. Such a beautiful day for a winter walk." My stomach dropped. Monday at 11 in the morning, Michael had told me he was downtown interviewing for a marketing position at a tech company. He'd gotten dressed in his one good suit, the navy blue one I'd bought him for his college graduation 8 years ago. He'd even asked me to iron his shirt. "They looked like they were having such a good time," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "Young love, you know." I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I felt sick. Navy Pier was nowhere near the loop where his supposed interview was. And funnel cake? Job interviews don't usually include carnival food. When Michael came home that afternoon around 4, he launched into this elaborate story about how well the interview had gone. "Mom, I think I really have a shot at this one. The hiring manager loved my ideas about social media integration. He said he'd call me by Friday." I looked at him sitting on my couch, still in that suit, spinning lie after lie with such confidence. For a moment, I wondered if Mrs. Rodriguez had been mistaken. Maybe she'd seen someone who looked like Michael. But then I noticed something. There was powdered sugar on his tie. "How did the interview go, really?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "I told you, Mom, it was great. Really promising." He was already loosening his tie, that same casual confidence he'd always had when he thought he was getting away with something. Where was the office again? Downtown, near State and Lake. State and Lake was 25 miles from Navy Pier. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that powdered sugar, about Mrs. Rodriguez's innocent comment, about the way Michael had looked me straight in the eye and lied. Friday came and went. No phone call about the job. When I asked, Michael said they were still deciding and should hear something the following week. The following week, there was another excuse, then another. That's when I started paying closer attention. Michael and Emily had developed a routine. Every morning around 9, after I'd made breakfast and cleaned up, they'd get dressed like they were going somewhere important. Michael would put on business casual clothes, khakis, a button-down shirt, sometimes that navy suit. Emily would do her hair and makeup like she was going to a photo shoot. "Job hunting," Michael would say, kissing my cheek on his way out. "Emily's got some meetings with potential sponsors, and I've got a couple interviews lined up." They'd leave together and come back around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, usually with stories about how promising everything was, how close they were to landing something big. But I started noticing things. Little things. Like how their clothes never looked wrinkled, even after supposedly spending all day in offices and coffee shops. Like how Emily's makeup was always still perfect, her hair still styled, even after a full day of meetings. Like how they always seemed to come home happy and relaxed, not tired and stressed like people actually job hunting. And then there were the receipts. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. I was just emptying the kitchen trash one Thursday evening when I saw a crumpled receipt from Lou Malnati's Pizzeria. Lunch for 2 with appetizers and drinks. $47.63. The timestamp showed 1:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same Tuesday Michael had told me he was interviewing at a nonprofit downtown. I smoothed out the receipt and stared at it. $47 for lunch. I spent $40 on groceries for an entire week. Over the next few days, I started finding more receipts. Starbucks, $41 for specialty drinks and pastries. The movies, $36 for tickets and concessions. Target, $93 for clothes and cosmetics. They were spending money like they had jobs. Good jobs. But neither of them was working. The pieces didn't add up, and I was tired of pretending they did. So I did something I'd never done before in my 65 years. I decided to follow them. On Monday morning, I made breakfast as usual. Michael and Emily got dressed for their job hunting, complete with Michael carrying his leather portfolio and Emily bringing her oversized purse that she claimed held her professional materials. "Big day today, Mom," Michael said, straightening his tie. "I've got a second interview with that marketing firm, and Emily's meeting with a brand that wants to sponsor her content." "That's wonderful," I said, handing him a travel mug of coffee. "What time is your interview?" 10:30 downtown. Emily's meeting is at 11 near Michigan Avenue." They left at 9:15. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my purse and car keys. I followed them in my Honda, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice me. Instead of heading toward downtown or Michigan Avenue, they drove straight to Brookfield Zoo. Brookfield Zoo, on a Monday morning. For their interviews. I parked across the street and watched through my windshield as they bought tickets, laughed with the cashier, and walked hand in hand toward the entrance like they didn't have a care in the world. They spent 4 hours at the zoo. I know because I sat in that parking lot, engine running for heat, watching the entrance until they came out at 2:30 p.m. Then they went to lunch at a sit-down restaurant in the zoo's parking area. Then they went shopping at the gift shop. When they finally left around 4 p.m., I followed them to a Baskin-Robbins where they bought ice cream sundaes and sat outside eating them and taking selfies. They came home at 5:15 p.m. with stories about how exhausting job hunting was and how they needed to decompress from all the stress of interviews and meetings. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, not just because they'd lied, but because of how elaborate the lie was. They'd created entire fictional schedules, complete with times and locations. They'd practiced their stories. They'd looked me in the eye every single morning for months and performed this charade while I worried about how to stretch my Social Security check to cover their increasing expenses. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was where the money was coming from. I started watching their spending more carefully after that. Not following them again. Once was enough, but paying attention to their purchases, their habits, their cash flow. Emily always had money for coffee, for lunch, for the little shopping trips they took when they weren't pretending to job hunt. She'd come home with new clothes, new makeup, new accessories. Always something. Michael always had cash in his wallet. Not just a few dollars, but 20s and 50s. When they ordered food delivery, which was at least 3 times a week, he'd pull out a $50 bill like it was nothing. So where was the money coming from? I got my answer on a Thursday afternoon when Emily left her laptop open on the kitchen table. She'd gone to take a shower, and Michael was in his room on a phone call. I was putting away groceries when I saw the screen. She had multiple browser windows open: Facebook, Instagram, her email, and something called Premium Snap. I'd heard about these premium social media accounts where people sell exclusive photos and videos to subscribers who pay monthly fees. I felt my face get hot just thinking about it, but I couldn't look away from the screen. Emily had a premium account, and according to what I could see on her earnings dashboard, she was making between $800 and $1,200 a month selling intimate content to strangers on the internet. She was making more money taking off her clothes online than I was getting from Social Security. And she was doing it in my apartment. In the bedroom, I provided for free. Using the internet, I paid for. I quickly moved away from the laptop before Emily came back. But my mind was racing. $1,200 a month was serious money. More than enough to cover their share of expenses, maybe even enough for them to get their own place. But instead of contributing anything to our household, they were letting me struggle with bills while they played house and went on dates with money Emily earned from her private content business. I felt disgusted, not just by what Emily was doing, but by the fact that they were essentially freeloading off me while she had a source of income they'd never mentioned. But I still didn't know the full scope of their betrayal. That came 2 weeks later, when I made a discovery that changed everything. Michael had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. It kept buzzing with text messages, and I could see the message previews on the lock screen. Most were from Emily, just casual things, but one was from someone named Tyler that made my blood run cold. "Dude, did you check out those assisted living places yet? The sooner you get your mom situated, the sooner you can focus on your real plans." My hands started shaking. I picked up the phone, but it was password protected. I couldn't see the full conversation, but that one preview message told me everything I needed to know. Michael wasn't just lying about job hunting. He wasn't just letting me support him and his girlfriend while they lived like college students on spring break. He was actively planning to get rid of me. Assisted living places. Get your mom situated. They weren't planning to move out of my apartment. They were planning to move me out. I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it and walked to my bedroom on unsteady legs. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed I'd shared with Robert for 26 years, and felt like the ground had fallen out from under me. My son was plotting to put me in a nursing home so he could have my apartment to himself, the apartment I'd worked 34 years to pay for. The home where I'd raised him, where his father and I had sacrificed everything to give him the best life we could, and he wanted to take it away from me so he could focus on his real plans. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I heard the shower turn off. I heard Michael and Emily talking and laughing in the kitchen. I heard them making plans to go out to dinner, again, while I figured out what to eat from the dwindling groceries in my refrigerator. But what I heard most clearly was the sound of my own voice in my head, finally telling me the truth I'd been avoiding for months. My son didn't love me. He loved what I could provide for him. And when providing for him became inconvenient, he was ready to dispose of me like an old piece of furniture. That night, I called my sister Margaret in Milwaukee. "Maggie," I said when she answered, "I need your help, and I think it's time we had that conversation about the apartment." But what I didn't know was that the conversation I'd overheard was just the beginning. What I found out over the next few weeks about Michael and Emily's real plan was going to test every ounce of strength I had left. Part 4. The Final Preparation Act. 3B. Preparation. Margaret Patricia O'Brien is my older sister by 3 years, and she's always been the stronger one between us. While I was in Chicago teaching teenagers about quadratic equations, she was in Milwaukee running her own accounting firm and raising 3 kids after her husband died young. When I called her that Thursday night, crying and barely able to get the words out about what Michael was planning, she didn't hesitate for even a second. "Patricia Ann Sullivan, you listen to me," she said in that no-nonsense voice that had terrified bullies when we were kids. "That boy has lost his damn mind if he thinks he can put you in a home and steal your apartment. We're going to fix this, and we're going to fix it right now." The conversation lasted 2 hours. I told her everything. The lies about job hunting, the mysterious money, Emily's income, the text message about assisted living facilities. Margaret listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear her accountant's brain organizing all the information. "First things first," she said when I finished. "Do you remember when we transferred the deed 5 years ago, After Robert died and you were worried about Michael's future? I did remember. It was 2019, just a year after Robert's funeral. Michael had dropped out of college and was bouncing between minimum wage jobs, spending more money than he made, and constantly asking me for loans he never paid back. I was terrified that if something happened to me, Michael would inherit the apartment and lose it within 2 years through bad decisions or debt. Margaret had suggested transferring the deed to her name as a protective measure. Legally, she would own the apartment, but we had a written agreement that I could live there for the rest of my life. If I ever wanted to sell, we'd split the proceeds equally. If I died first, Margaret would inherit the property, but would hold Michael's share in trust until he demonstrated financial responsibility. That paperwork is still valid, right? I asked. Absolutely. I reviewed it with my lawyer just last month for tax purposes. The apartment belongs to me, free and clear, which means I can decide who lives there. The relief I felt was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my own life. But Margaret wasn't finished. Now, here's what we're going to do. You're going to document everything, every lie, every expense they've stuck you with, every example of disrespect. I want dates, amounts, and details. Can you do that? I could. Over the next week, I kept a detailed journal of everything Michael and Emily did. I wrote down their fake job hunting stories, timed how long they were actually gone, and noted when their stories didn't match their receipts. I documented every grocery bill, every utility increase, every time they ate food I'd bought without contributing anything. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd thought. In 6 months, Michael and Emily had cost me an additional $437 per month in expenses. Groceries had gone from $120 a month to $250. The electric bill had increased by $70. Water usage was up 50%. And that didn't count the little things. Emily using my expensive shampoo and skincare products, Michael eating the special coffee and lunch meat I bought for myself, both of them ordering delivery food 3 or 4 times a week and leaving me to figure out my own meals. $437 might not sound like much to some people, but when your total monthly income is $2,300, that's almost 20%. That's the difference between having a small emergency fund and living paycheck to paycheck. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how they treated me in my own home. I started writing down the little humiliations, too. How Emily would roll her eyes when I asked her to clean up her makeup from my bathroom counter. How Michael would sigh dramatically when I mentioned that we needed groceries, like feeding them was an unreasonable burden. How they'd have loud conversations about their future plans, travels they wanted to take, apartments they might rent, business ideas they might pursue, right in front of me, without ever acknowledging that their current lifestyle was only possible because of my support. Most painful of all was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. One evening, I was in my bedroom when I heard Emily on the phone with someone, probably one of her friends. "No, it's so awkward," Emily was saying. "She's always here, you know? Like, I get that it's her place, but she acts like she owns the place. She acts like she owns the place. In the apartment I'd been paying for since before Emily was born. And she's so cheap about everything," Emily continued. "Like, she'll buy the generic cereal and then get upset when we eat it. We're adults. We can eat whatever cereal we want. The generic cereal I bought because name brand cereal cost $4 more per box, and I was trying to stretch my grocery budget to accommodate 2 extra people who never offered to contribute. That's when I realized that in their minds, I wasn't the homeowner letting them stay rent-free. I was the difficult roommate who didn't understand how sharing worked. But Emily wasn't done. "Michael says we just have to put up with it for a little while longer," she said. "He's looking into some options for her. You know, like places where she'd be around people her own age and wouldn't have to worry about taking care of a big apartment." My stomach lurched. There it was again, their plan to get rid of me. But this time, I was recording. Margaret had suggested I document their conversations, so I'd started keeping my phone nearby and hitting record whenever they seemed to be discussing their future plans. I had Emily's entire phone conversation saved on my phone, including the part where she talked about how much money she was making from her modeling work, and how they were saving up to get their own place once they sorted out the Patricia situation. The Patricia situation. That's what my life had become. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered more evidence than I'd ever wanted to have. I recorded Michael on the phone with someone named Tyler, discussing different assisted living facilities and their costs. The one in Schaumburg is nice, but it's like $3,000 a month, Michael said. Mom's Social Security and pension are only about $2,300, but if we can get her qualified for Medicaid, that would cover most of it. $3,000 a month. He was talking about putting me in a facility that would cost more than my entire income, forcing me to rely on government assistance so he could live rent-free in the apartment I'd spent 3 decades paying for. I also discovered that Emily wasn't just making money from Premium SNAP. She had a second income source that was even more disturbing. I found out by accident when her laptop battery died, and she asked if she could use my old desktop computer in the spare room just for a few minutes to check her email. I said yes, thinking nothing of it. But an hour later, she was still in there, and I could hear strange sounds coming from the room, music, talking, what sounded like a party. When I walked by the open door, I saw Emily on a video call with multiple people, wearing just a bra and shorts, dancing and talking in a sultry voice. There were usernames and dollar amounts flashing on the screen. She was doing live video calls with men who were paying her in real time. She was essentially running a strip club out of my spare bedroom. I backed away before she saw me, but I felt sick. This was happening in my home, the home I'd shared with my husband for 26 years, the home where I'd raised my son to respect women and work hard for honest money. And that's when the final piece of their plan fell into place. The next morning, Emily was unusually friendly to me. She made coffee without being asked, complimented my hair, even offered to help me with groceries. "Patricia, can I ask you something?" she said, as I was getting ready to leave for the store. "Of course. Michael and I have been talking, and we're worried about you. You seem so stressed lately, and we know how hard it is to manage everything by yourself." I felt like I was about to hear something terrible, but I just nodded. "We've been looking into some really nice senior communities. Not nursing homes," she said quickly, "but like places where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and bills and all that stuff. They have activities and people your age to socialize with." She pulled out her phone and showed me a brochure she'd saved. Sunset Manor Assisted Living, the same facility Michael had been talking about on the phone. "Look how beautiful it is," Emily said, scrolling through photos of a sterile-looking building with fake plants and overstuffed furniture. "They have a dining room so you wouldn't have to cook, and a library, and they even have movie nights." My hands were shaking, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "That's thoughtful of you to research that. Michael thinks you'd really love it. And the best part is, it wouldn't cost you anything out of pocket if you qualified for assistance. We could help you with the application process." There it was, the full plan, delivered with a smile and presented as if they were doing me a favor. They wanted to put me on Medicaid, stick me in a government-subsidized facility, and take over my apartment. They'd probably been planning this for months, just waiting for the right moment to present it as the solution to my stress. "I'll think about it," I told Emily. "Of course, no pressure at all. We just want what's best for you." What's best for me? Right. That afternoon I called Margaret again and told her about Emily's presentation. Those manipulative little... Margaret caught herself before finishing the curse word. "Patricia, they're not just planning to steal your home. They're planning to destroy your independence and stick you with the bill for their lifestyle." She was right. If I went into assisted living, my Social Security and pension would go directly to the facility. I'd have no money of my own, no way to leave if I wanted to, no control over my own life. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily would be living rent-free in an apartment worth $180,000, building equity I'd never see. "It's time," Margaret said. "Are you ready?" I thought about everything Michael and I had been through together. The nights I'd stayed up helping him with math homework, the soccer games I'd attended in the rain, the college application essays I'd helped him write, the money Robert and I had saved for his education that he'd never finished, the sacrifices we'd made so he could have opportunities we never had. I thought about Robert and what he would say if he could see what our son had become. And I thought about the woman I used to be, the teacher who never let students disrespect her, who demanded excellence and wouldn't accept excuses. That woman was still inside me somewhere, and it was time to let her take charge. "I'm ready," I told Margaret. "Let's do this." We spent 3 hours on the phone that night, planning every detail. Margaret would drive down from Milwaukee the following weekend with the official eviction notice. I would prepare Michael and Emily for the confrontation by gathering all my documentation and rehearsing what I was going to say. But first, we needed to catch them in their lies one more time. "Here's what we're going to do," Margaret said. "Tomorrow morning, tell them you're going to visit me in Milwaukee for the weekend. Tell them you're leaving Friday and coming back Sunday. But actually, leave Thursday night and stay in a hotel near your apartment." "Why?" "Because I want to see what they do when they think you're gone. I want to know if they're bringing other people over, if they're treating your home like their personal party house. And I want you to see it too, so you know exactly who you're dealing with." It was a good plan. A necessary plan. But I was terrified. On Thursday night, I told Michael and Emily I was driving up to Milwaukee early to spend a long weekend with Margaret. "You two have the place to yourselves," I said. "Just please keep things clean." Michael hugged me goodbye. "Drive safe, Mom. Tell Aunt Maggie hi." Emily waved from the couch. "Have fun, Patricia?" They seemed genuinely happy to see me go. I drove to a Holiday Inn about 2 miles from my apartment and checked in under Margaret's name. From my hotel room window, I could see the lights of Cicero in the distance. My home was out there somewhere, being occupied by 2 people who were planning to betray me. I barely slept that night. Friday morning, I drove back to my neighborhood and parked across the street from my building, behind a delivery truck that blocked my car from view. At 10:47 a.m., I watched Michael and Emily leave the building together. They were dressed casually, holding hands, looking like a couple on vacation. I waited until they were out of sight, then used my key to enter my own apartment. What I found inside made me feel sick all over again. They had turned my living room into a party setup. My coffee table was covered with beer bottles and fast food containers. There were clothes scattered on my furniture, not just theirs, but clothes I didn't recognize, meaning they'd had other people over. My kitchen was a disaster, with dirty dishes piled in the sink and sticky spills on the counter. But the worst part was in Michael's room. They had moved my deceased husband's dresser, the dresser Robert had built with his own hands during our first year of marriage, into the hallway to make room for a video setup. Ring lights, a professional camera, backdrops, and a computer with multiple monitors. Emily hadn't just been doing her video calls from my spare room. She'd turned Michael's bedroom into a full-scale content creation studio, in the apartment where I'd raised my son, using furniture my husband had made. I took pictures of everything, every mess, every piece of equipment, every sign that they'd been living like college students whose parents were out of town. Then I went back to the hotel and called Margaret. "It's worse than we thought," I told her. "They've basically turned my home into a content studio and a party house." "That's it," Margaret said. "I'm driving down tonight. We're ending this tomorrow." I spent Friday night at the hotel, eating takeout Chinese food and rehearsing what I was going to say. I practiced in the mirror, trying to keep my voice strong and clear. I wrote down key points on hotel stationery so I wouldn't forget anything important. By Saturday morning, I felt ready. Margaret arrived at 7 a.m. with a manila envelope containing the eviction notice and copies of all the legal documents proving she owned my apartment. We had breakfast at a diner near my building, going over the plan one more time. "Remember," Margaret said, "you don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them second chances. You're not being mean, you're being smart, and it's about time." At 8:30 a.m., I used my key to enter my apartment. Margaret waited in her car outside. Michael and Emily were at the kitchen table, exactly where this story began, eating the breakfast I'd made them hundreds of times before. I walked to the counter, pulled the manila envelope from my purse, and placed it next to Michael's plate. And that's when I delivered the line I'd been practicing for 2 days. "Good morning. I hope you're both ready for some big changes. If you want to know how 30-year-old Michael and 24-year-old Emily reacted when they realized their free ride was over, and how a 65-year-old retired teacher finally got her life back, you need to hear what happened next. But I have to warn you, what I said to them in that kitchen changed everything forever." Part 5. The Reckoning Act 4. confrontation and resolution. Michael looked up from his scrambled eggs with that familiar lazy smile he always wore when he thought he had everything under control. "Morning, Mom. How was Milwaukee?" "I never went to Milwaukee," I said calmly, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from him. "I spent the night at the Holiday Inn on Cicero Avenue, watching what you two did when you thought I was gone." Emily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Michael's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" he asked, but his voice had already changed. The casual confidence was cracking. I reached across the table and picked up his phone, which was sitting face down next to his orange juice. "I mean, I know about Tyler. I know about the assisted living facilities. I know about the $3,000 a month you were planning to stick me with while you took over my apartment." Michael's face went white. "Mom, I can explain." "I'm not finished." My voice was steady, stronger than it had been in months. "I also know about Emily's private content business in your bedroom. You know, the one where she's using my internet connection and my electricity to run her subscription service." Emily shot to her feet so fast her chair fell backward. "You went through our stuff? That's completely invasive. You can't just—" "I can't just what?" I stood up too, and for the first time in months, I felt taller than both of them. "I can't enter my own apartment? I can't see what's happening under my own roof? This is crazy," Emily said, her voice getting shrill. "Michael, your mom is having some kind of breakdown. Maybe we should call someone." That's when I pulled the manila envelope from my purse and set it on the table. "Open it," I said to Michael. He stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What is it?" "Open it, or I'll open it for you." With trembling hands, Michael tore open the envelope. The first document he pulled out was the deed to the apartment, clearly showing Margaret's name as the legal owner. The second was a formal eviction notice, signed by Margaret and witnessed by her lawyer. Michael's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally panic as he read. This says Aunt Maggie owns the apartment. That can't be right." "It's been in Margaret's name for 5 years," I said. "Ever since I realized you weren't going to get your act together." Emily grabbed the papers from Michael's hands. "This is fake. This has to be fake. Patricia, you can't do this." "I'm not doing anything. Margaret is. This is her property, and she's decided she doesn't want tenants who don't pay rent, don't contribute to expenses, and plot to put the previous tenant in a nursing home." Michael looked like he might throw up. "Mom, please let me explain. The whole assisted living thing, that wasn't— We were just worried about you. You've seemed so stressed lately and we thought—" "Stop." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended, but I was done listening to lies. "I heard the phone calls, Michael. I heard you telling Tyler that you needed to get me situated so you could focus on your real plans. I heard Emily telling her friend about the Patricia situation that you needed to sort out." Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You were listening to our private conversations? In my own home?" "Yes. And thank God I was, because otherwise I would never have known that my own son was planning to steal my independence and stick me in a facility I can't afford while he and his girlfriend lived rent-free in the apartment I worked 34 years to pay for." Michael tried one more approach. "Mom, you don't understand. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were trying to help. You're getting older, and managing this place by yourself is a lot of work." "I managed it just fine before you moved back in," I interrupted. "The stress you're talking about? The financial problems, the difficulty managing things, all of that started when you and Emily decided to make my home your personal resort." I reached into my purse again and pulled out my phone, opening the voice recording app. "Would you like to hear your conversation with Tyler about which assisted living facility would be cheapest? Or maybe Emily's phone call where she complained about me acting like I own the place I actually do own?" Both of them stared at my phone like I was holding a grenade. "You recorded us?" Michael's voice cracked like he was 13 years old again. "I documented everything. The lies about job hunting while you went to Navy Pier. The mystery income from Emily's adult entertainment business. The increase in my expenses that you never offered to help with. The disrespect, the manipulation, and yes, the plan to get rid of me." Margaret had told me that this moment would be crucial. "Don't let them turn it around on you," she'd said. "Don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting yourself." Emily tried anyway. "Patricia, this is insane. We're family. You can't just throw us out on the street. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't plot to put each other in nursing homes. Family doesn't lie about looking for work while they spend their days at the zoo. Family doesn't turn someone's bedroom into a private content studio without permission. That's not fair, Emily started. What's not fair, I said, my voice rising, is two healthy adults in their 20s and 30s living off a 65-year-old woman's Social Security check while planning to put her away so they can take her home. Michael was crying now. Real tears, not the crocodile tears he'd used to get out of trouble as a child. Mom, please, I'm sorry. We made mistakes, but you can't just abandon me. I'm your son. For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was my little boy, the child I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for. But then I remembered the text message about getting me situated. I remembered Emily calling me a problem to be solved. I remembered months of being treated like a burden in my own home. Michael, I said gently, I love you. I will always love you. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy my life to make yours easier. You're 30 years old. You're healthy and intelligent. You had every advantage your father and I could give you. It's time to use those advantages to build your own life instead of living off mine. But where are we supposed to go? Emily demanded. We don't have anywhere to live. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You've been making good money from your online business. Michael's been talking about his entrepreneurial projects for years. Figure it out. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it to reveal Margaret standing in the hallway. She was holding another manila envelope and wearing the expression that had made grown men apologize to her in boardrooms. Margaret! Michael scrambled to his feet. Aunt Maggie, please, you have to talk to Mom. She's not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Margaret said, stepping into the apartment. The question is whether you are. Patricia told me everything, Michael. Everything. She handed him the second envelope. That's a formal eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Any personal property left behind after that date will be disposed of. Emily rounded on me. This is revenge. You're mad that we didn't treat you like a queen, so you're destroying our lives. I felt something snap inside me. Revenge? Emily, let me tell you what revenge would look like. Revenge would be me calling your parents in Rockford and telling them what you're really doing for money. Revenge would be me posting screenshots of your premium Snap account on the neighborhood Facebook page. Revenge would be me calling the police about the unauthorized business you've been running in my apartment without permits or licenses. Her face went chalk white. You wouldn't. Try me, I said. I have 34 years of dealing with disrespectful teenagers who thought they could push me around. You want to see what happens when I stop being nice? Margaret stepped forward. Emily, I suggest you start packing. And Michael, if you think you can drag this out or make it difficult, let me remind you that I'm a CPA with 40 years of experience dealing with people who try to cheat the system. I know every legal remedy available to property owners dealing with problem tenants. Michael tried one last desperate play. What about Dad? What would Dad think about you throwing out his son? I felt like he'd slapped me. Robert's memory was sacred to me, and Michael knew it. But Margaret answered before I could. Your father would be ashamed of the man you've become, Michael. He worked 2 jobs to pay for this apartment. He saved every penny so you could go to college. He taught you that a man takes care of his family, not the other way around. And you repay that legacy by lying to your mother and plotting to steal her home? Michael collapsed back into his chair, finally understanding that this wasn't a negotiation. Over the next 30 days, I watched my son and his girlfriend scramble to figure out their lives. Emily moved out within a week, taking her video equipment and leaving behind a passive-aggressive note about how disappointed she was in me. She found a studio apartment in Berwyn that she could barely afford on her subscription content income. Michael tried everything. He cried, he bargained, he promised to change, he brought up every sacrifice I'd ever made for him. He even got his friend Tyler to call me, pretending to be concerned about Michael's mental health and suggesting that I was being unnecessarily harsh. But I held firm. Margaret helped me get the locks changed and installed a security camera by the front door. She also helped me open a new bank account that Michael couldn't access and change all my passwords. The hardest part was watching Michael finally face reality. For the first time since high school, he had to find a real job, fast. No more talk about entrepreneurial projects or waiting for the right opportunity. He needed money for rent and food, immediately. He found work at a cell phone store in a mall, starting at $12 an hour. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. He also had to find a roommate situation, splitting a 2-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood with a guy from his job. But you know what? He survived. More than that, he started to change. About 6 months after the eviction, Michael called me. Not to ask for money or to guilt-trip me about the apartment, but to apologize. "Mom," he said, his voice different somehow, more mature, less entitled. "I get it now. I finally understand what you were trying to teach me." "What's that?" I asked. "That I was destroying myself by refusing to grow up, and I was destroying you too. You gave me everything, and I turned into someone who thought taking was normal and giving was optional." I cried when he said that. Happy tears. Today, 2 years later, Michael manages that cell phone store. He's engaged to a nurse named Jennifer who treats him like an equal partner, not a meal ticket. He still makes mistakes, but he owns them now instead of making excuses. He visits me every other weekend in my new apartment in Milwaukee, where I live 5 minutes from Margaret. He always brings flowers or groceries, and he always asks what he can do to help with housework or errands. Most importantly, he treats me with respect. Not the fake politeness of someone trying to manipulate me, but the genuine respect of an adult child who understands what his mother sacrificed for him. Emily, as far as I know, is still doing her online content business and living paycheck to paycheck in Berwyn. She sent me a Facebook friend request last year, which I declined. As for me, I'm happier than I've been in years. My new apartment is smaller, but it's mine. My bills are manageable again. I have energy for hobbies I'd forgotten I enjoyed. Reading, gardening, volunteering at the local library. But the best part is that I have my self-respect back. I'm not the invisible woman who gets pushed around in her own home anymore. I'm Patricia Sullivan, the woman who taught high school math for 34 years, who raised a good man despite some serious detours, and who finally learned that love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. That 65-year-old woman who was afraid to stand up for herself, she's gone. In her place is someone who knows her worth and won't settle for less than she deserves. And every time someone tries to take advantage of my kindness now, I think about that Saturday morning in my kitchen when I finally said enough. And I remember that being nice doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes, the people we love most need us to stop enabling their worst behavior. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is refuse to be their safety net when they're not even trying to fly. It took me 65 years to learn that lesson, but better late than never. If this story touched your heart, please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of overcoming adversity and finding your strength. And watch now the story that's playing on your screen. You won't believe what this grandmother did when her family tried to steal her inheritance.